big swing. Episode 2, episode 1 with a guest. And we have Tim Lozier, which is deeply meaningful for me, actually completely insane. Corey, I remember this a couple years ago when you took over as VP of Sales, Head of Sales at Detection, and you were talking to me about potentially having Funk Futures come in and do some, lead gen, top of funnel services to complement your sales team there and Tim's extensive marketing efforts. And I'll never forget, you said, listen, I know this is kind of weird, but there's somebody that I need you to talk to. He's sort of like my colleague, sort of my equal here on the marketing side, but his name is Tim Lozier. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So for those, I'm sure people listening, maybe a smile came to their face. My podcast co-host, my good friend, rest in peace, Tim Lozier. That's like it's first of all, it's a unique name, right? The spelling is different. He had like the Loser, which is a tough one. Nobody gets you confused and calls you Tim Loser. Tim.
I got a few of those growing up though, so
it's too easy. It's too easy. But the Z is like, it's probably a little bit more common, makes it easier. You got the I in there, but I'm like, you're kidding. I'm going to be working with a guy named Tim Lozier. So for me, it's a bit of a full circle moment here to start a new podcast, to have our first guest ever on, and we both agreed and made it very clear our first guest to be interviewed is going to be Tim Lozier. So hopefully he's smiling down right now, Tim Lozier. But this Tim Lozier is down here with us, and we're going to jump into all of the big breakthrough media things, all the fun things that you're doing from a marketing perspective in your world. But Corey, why don't you dive into your history a little bit with Tim, since you're the one that made the connection between the three of us.
Yeah, I think with what you were saying about just the past with Tim and me meeting this Tim at Detection, it made sense for him to be the first guest, which then ultimately kicks off kind of our first series, right? So this is the first episode of our first series, we'll say, for go-to-market marketing. As Jeremy mentioned on the last podcast, we might have some play in the words where marketing with oil and gas can mean something completely different. But Jeremy and I know a lot of software folks, a lot of B2B companies where marketing is always a conversation. And so as we have, future guests on this, on this show, we thought it would be a great way to kick it off, having Tim first, kicking off the go-to-market marketing side of that. So we're glad to have Tim with it. So Tim and I, or it's meaningful to me, Tim and I met a couple years ago when we both joined Detection. He was head of marketing, I was head of sales, and we kind of hit it off, kind of that first call, Tim. You reached out to me, you started a month before me, right? And you're like, well, hey, I got to know who my counterpart in crime is going to be, right, for the sales team. And so we had a good 30-minute conversation. I remember I was just sitting at my countertop, just taking a couple of calls, but knew that was an important one because I was going to see how we hit it off on that first call. And I knew it was going to really set the stage as we started working together. How fluid were we going to be? How much did we see the roadmap together eye to eye, or was there going to be a lot of friction and second guessing of how we do things or seeing it completely different? But look, it wasn't that, man. So we spent time in the trenches. I don't think there was a day that went on through the time we were there where we didn't talk. We were always making sure our teams were aligned. And so we just built such a good, bond, a good working relationship, a good friendship, kept that going. And here we are, right? New chapters of our life. But man, I think it was such a critical moment for both of us and how we did everything. So I'm excited to have you on as really our first guest this way of the episode, man. So, without further ado, we got Tim, and I think it's only fair for, me to pass the mic over to you, Tim. Like, tell us a little bit about you. Who is Tim Lozier?
Who is Tim Lozier? I'm honored, guys. This is great. Look, I love working with both you guys, and I feel like you guys can't get rid of me, and I can't get rid of you. So I guess we're kind of just intertwined here. So it's only fair, right? Man, yeah. I mean, who's Tim Lozier, right? I don't know. Let's think about this. Once upon a time, there was a boy from the desert in Tatooine. He wanted to be a Jedi like his father. No, that's not me. No, I've been around for 25 years in this space. I've always had this overactive imagination and like really just an inability to sit still growing up. And so, as I kind of, grew up and started thinking about what I wanted to do, I became a marketer. And, I'm from Amityville. I'm from New York. So if you guys are horror fans, I live near the Amityville Horror House. In fact, one of my best friends actually lives in the house.
Wait,
which
what?
is pretty cool.
Huh?
Yeah. So there's my small claim to fame.
Just starting this off with the bang.
Yeah, so maybe you've heard of Amityville. One of my friends lives in the horror house. All right, so do you go over there? Or what does this guy just have no fear
we go there all the
whatsoever?
time. Yeah. In fact, they started doing the Halloween parties again. They used to do the Halloween parties before COVID. They had to have a bouncer and everything. You had to get a wristband because like people would just come and creep all over the place. It was wild. But yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. Yeah, so yeah, I'm there a lot, and we go out there and we hang out. And,
That's wild. So I want to go back even further though. So did you grow up in Long Island? Is that where you're from? Yeah.
Yep, born and raised Long Island. And grew up on the water. Probably owned a boat before I had a bike, and just we would spend days exploring and doing stuff, and then eventually I went to school down south in Virginia, James Madison University, and like I came in, and I actually came in as like an English major or something like that. I don't know what it was. And so pretty quickly I switched to business because it was like I want to be creative, but I want to make money. And so marketing seemed like the right mix between, being able to express your creativity and still, kind of be in that business world. And then, came out on the other side and actually lived in Denver for a while, man. I worked at a design company there, a design software company in Denver. So I was near you, Jeremy.
When did you live out here? What years were we talking about?
Oh, what was it, 2000 to 2003, 4, something like that, something in that range. And then I moved back to Long Island. I was like, all right, well, let's go back to the roots and let's come back in here. And,
That's cool.
Got married, had 3 kids, starting to pay for college and that and all that stuff. It's, pretty much never sitting still these days. It's like, it's unbelievable. So it's been a wild ride coming where I'm coming. The irony is my senior in high school, she's looking at JMU at this point, and so I'm like, wow, this is like life repeating itself. But yeah, so just been kind of coming in there and just like I still haven't been sitting still ever since the beginning. I'm just moving around, just always finding something interesting to do. So
nice,
that's awesome, Tim.
That's Tim.
Well. And so I think, when you and I were first starting at Detection, right, it wasn't so much about your career being in oil and gas. That was obviously, an oil and gas service company. But primarily your focus was B2B software side. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, so if you think about it, like I came back after, I came back to New York, and I think the first company I worked at was a small B2B software startup. It was probably before even SaaS was a thing. So we were like on-prem, we were everything. And so it was bootstrap, just kind of putting everything together, getting scrappy. We built that company from like 5 million to 40 million in the time that I was there. We exited that company, and I caught the bug. I kind of, my history has always been going after B2B companies that are in that kind of growth mode, small but mighty, if you will, right? And really looking at industries where there's like a little bit of complexity in the sale. There's a lot of people, the personas, the people who are like buying the software, they're kind of a double life, right? They're responsible for the software and like solving the challenges, but they're actually out there doing it, right? You know, so like I had people like when I worked at E2Q, which was the company I first worked at. You know, you had guys that were on the shop floor, and they were also in the back room doing computers. And it's just the same thing with detection. You had guys who were, you know, out there in the ops center, you know, trying to figure out how to, you know, maximize, you know, their compression units. And then, you know, every once in a while they go on a call out and they'd have to be out there. So I always like gravitated towards that small kind of, you know, that B2B software that really catered to that almost everyman type of persona where people just were doing it. So it's just kind of stuck with me. I mean, you know, 25 years later, I'm still, you know, working with companies and still learning how to help them grow and break through from that one area where they come from. You know, a lot of times these smaller companies, right, they're like network led growth, right? So they started, they got a great product, they got a decent customer base, and they got, you know, a lot of people that they can work with, and they kind of need to break through from just their network to actual market-led growth. And so that was, you know, when I kind of decided to start my business, I used the term big breakthrough. And I'd be lying if I said that Jeremy didn't have a hand in like saying, you know, kind of inspiring me on that one. But, you know, how do you break through? How do you kind of break through that barrier of just being like, okay, we're kind of on momentum right now. How do we accelerate? And that's kind of been my gig for the last several years. I mean, detection was no different, right? I mean, we were kind of just building that whole program out, and it was a lot of fun.
So there's a lot there, and like without giving away all of the secret sauce, but give us a little bit of tease. Like, how do you do it? And I think this is particularly relevant to me. So maybe you're just talking to me and giving me this advice, but I do think our listeners as well. It's a lot of entrepreneurs. It's a lot of people that are out there hustling, trying to either start their own business or in the throes of the early stages of business, where you're right. Like, it is a lot of founder-led growth. It's referral-led growth. And the idea of marketing is it's risky. It's possibly putting money into something that might not ever return anything, or if it does return something, it could take a long time. So how do you balance you need to do some marketing, you need to effectively break through and go from where you're at today, that founder-led growth, that referral sort of based, you know, business evolution, to actually getting exposure to your company, to building a brand, to having companies come to you, and do it in a way where you don't have to take a massive risk in bringing on a full-blown marketing team to do it. Give me a sense of, like, how do you do that? How do you execute when you see a company that is in that founder-led window and take them to the next stage?
I mean, some might say you take a big swing.
Oh.
No, I'm funny. Funny, right? Yeah, that's the corny dad version of me.
We're all dads.
Yeah, it's wild. You know, I think the market and like marketing and the market has changed like in so many different ways. Like it's evolving every single month practically now, with the advent of AI and you know different types of marketing that have come out here, and I've talked about this a lot in my own, you know, my own videos and reels that I've done and, you know, various posts. But, you know, they're just much more savvy, and maybe even they're a little bit more finicky buyers when it comes to, you know, like looking at marketing, right? So they're very hyper aware of how to find information on their own and like what they need.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're very hypersensitive about giving their information away. So like, you know, even like, as much as like 2 years ago, we could have gone out and, you know, said, okay, well, I'll just put an ad out for a white paper, have them fill out a form, and I got the lead right there. Or they, you know, would do a keyword search for a type of software, and, you know, your goal was to say my site's going to come up, and they would schedule a demo right there.
Yeah.
But like in some circles, that's still like a thing, right? I mean, that still works, and I would never say like don't do that. But you know, the way AI has been evolving, and as part of the arsenal of tools that buyers have, they're doing like 80% of their research before they even you even hear from them. So they're out there
Yeah.
and they're looking for stuff that you do, but they're not looking at you necessarily. And the hardest thing for a small business, especially if you don't have like major brand recognition, is to try and stand out in this crowd where buyers are basically holding all the cards. So like the shift now is to understand how are they looking for information and make your marketing around that. So as an example, like chances are, and you guys probably do this, we probably all do this in our personal lives, because I know I'm naturally curious and I just, ask a billion questions to ChatGPT, but they're not always just searching like for, I don't know, project management software. They're just not doing it. They're not Googling it, whatever it is. They're probably either going to Google Gemini, ChatGPT or whatever, and they're asking, how do I consolidate my projects and filter them by priority and I can view it in all one view? So it's really a question, right? And now you find that even if they did it in Google, Gemini takes up about half the page. So if you have a search result, you're not even showing up unless Gemini doesn't have any answers. So if you're not part of that answer, you're not going to even be considered. So there's a lot of tools out there that help with that. But I think we're moving into this whole idea of answering buyer questions rather than trying to make our pitch. Like, no, I always use the phrase, know the story that needs to be told, not the story you want to tell. Because as marketers, we have a story, we have a value prop. Even as founders, it's like, this is what my product does. I love it. It's got, this is the value prop that I think I should be telling people. Well, that may not be what people are looking. So that's the shift. I mean, there's a lot of different things that, you can kind of, drill down into, but I don't want to get on a tangent yet. I mean, we'll get on a bunch of tangents, I'm sure, but.
Well, Tim, I think there's a couple things to break down with what you're saying, right? The beginning of it is, if you have startup led, that can be founder led, right? Whatever that founder background or co-founder background comes from, right? They more techie, more, developer, they more product guys, or they more sales centric forward, right? But what always kind of starts is a little bit of ham and egg, and hey, I know a few people at this companies, they'll make sure they give us some meetings and conversations. So you're kind of organically getting it. So let's say you get that business to, a few $100,000 a year or a couple $1 million a year. You're eventually, your ceiling's going to be met with, how I'm doing it today won't get me from $500,000 to $3 million. So what do I need to do differently in all aspects? And marketing has to come up in that conversation, right? Because a lot of people think they knew it. They all have opinions to marketing-led activities, right? But there's different ways to go about it. And there's different ways you have to carve this piece out to make sure, your business is growing, because what worked for you before doesn't necessarily work to grow it to the next level. So I think that's kind of what you're saying with it. On top of, now consider that, and the buying market has really changed over the years, and not just over the years or the decades with it. Like Jeremy, we talk about going to different conferences and trade shows because that's where you had to go to get information. Like, yeah, it's great to meet people and mingle, but you had to do that to get information. Now you don't necessarily have to have it as much. There's 100%. The internet's really blown up, right? And so then you incorporate AI, like you were saying, Tim. People are asking more question-based research, not just keyword research. And so there's probably a lot of marketing folks really kind of trying to tweak how they're going about their marketing, their branding, their messaging, right, to stay top of mind for those prospects. So talk just a little bit. You did give just a little snippet, but maybe just a little bit more, because I know probably the listeners are out there thinking of how do I position that to make sure people are doing some searches in Gemini and they're asking it more question led to figuring that out, or doing comparisons of products out there and having AI do the research for them, basically that way. What are just a couple things to comment to on that? I know it's a broad question, but just a couple things to think about based on your seat.
No, it's interesting because there's this whole thing like about the 4 Ps of marketing. Going back to the early rudimentary marketing 101, right? Product, price, place, promotion. I think it used to be, right? There's actually like a new AI version of the 4Ps, and I don't think I really coined it. I think I adopted it from something else, but it's problem, path, proof, and promise. And so the whole idea is like find out what their problem is. And there's like tools out there now that like also asks.com is one of them. Answerthepublic.com is another one where you can actually put in like your keywords of what your business does, and it'll like spit out what questions people are asking around that. So like you're actually also getting like there's tech out there that'll help you, but you have to know what the problem is that people are facing, not what the product can do. You never like don't pitch, right? And you kind of say, okay, well, what's the problem? And so you kind of build out that whole entire thing and say, what are the top questions that we want to ask? And you go to your customers, you go to the market, maybe you go to your customer success, you get on gong calls or whatever recording tools you have, Otter or whatever, and you start listening for the kind of problems they have, and you just start writing your messaging to answer that problem, because AI is going to look for that problem, and then you're going to put together kind of like a promise of how you're going to fix it, right? So, but like how the answer is going to be, and so you kind of think about, okay, what's the answer to that, and how do you build that answer in a way that's not pitchy, because AI is going to sniff that out right away. Yeah. And so that's like the hardest thing for a lot of people to do is say, okay, how do I create a piece of content, whether it's on my website, whether it's a LinkedIn post, whether it's a webinar, whatever it may be, that's going to be not pitchy about my product. It's going to be more about answering the questions. And then what AI then looks for is proof. Like what examples exist in the world that this is actually true. And so it'll say, okay, if you don't have like customer case studies, or you don't have ROI information, like, that will back up your claim, you're not going to, it's going to not validate you. It's not going to feel like it's trustworthy or credible. And the last thing is the last thing AI usually does, right? It never ends. It usually says, is there something else? It says, would you like me to do this now? Would you like me to compile a list of blah, 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 blah. And so if you don't put together a path for the next steps, like, call it a call to action, call it a, continuation, like a guide or whatever it is, to kind of drill down into that. It's that formula that works, and it keeps going and going and going. And like, I think when you're a small growing business and you are trying to, get that megaphone out there and make some noise, you're going to want to be able to give more authenticity of your voice and what you're trying to solve for, than the bigger guys, because they're already kind of stuck in their pitch thing, and they have like, the brand equity that they can use. And I think if you're scrappy enough and you build out that program, you'll be able to get picked up, and that's how you get noticed. And it's moving fast. I mean, a lot of marketers are just trying to keep up themselves.
Yeah.
So if you can imagine what these small but mighty businesses, like if they're operating on their own, like it's tough. I mean, it's tough to like keep up with it all. But that's just one of like many different ways you can go about it. The marketing in terms of in this new world and breakthrough. And you mentioned conferences. It's really funny you mention it, because I feel like conferences, or let's take the trade show, the days of just kind of showing up with a booth and being able to get seen is kind of like, it's there, but it's like, if you're not there speaking, I always say, look, if you're going to go to a show or a conference where like key people are going to be, try and get yourself on the stage somewhere, like on a relevant area, even if it's just a moderation. Like I remember, Corey, if you remember, like we did a show with Detection, and we weren't even presenting. We were just kind of the MC.
Yep.
I don't even know if you remember. Maybe you remember this. We were just the MC, right? And so the CEO of Kinetic was speaking about whatever he was speaking about, just whatever, wonderful things they're doing. And we did a quick spiel, just to talk about what we did. And then after the session, the CEO came up to one of our guys, is like, I need that. Like, we got to get that. And, like, that was cost us nothing. All of a sudden
Yeah.
the CEO of Kinetics, like, talking to our guy. And we just sat up there and, just started doing it. So I think it's not so much as like the show up and throw up kind of thing. It's more about how do you insert yourself into the conversation.
Yeah, I like that. There was a few things that you said that really stood out to me, and I think one that I'm really curious about, that I've wanted to ask you as sort of a marketing expert, is the buyers are far more educated than they've ever been. So at the point in time when they come to your website or they request more information, they're not naive. In fact, they have whatever bias or belief system in place about you before they ever actually talk to you. So the role then of the salesperson or whoever has that initial touch point with them is much different, right? It might be breaking perception or changing the viewpoint of the person, since they already sort of have an idea in mind of, we think this is what you cost, this is what you work with, this is the value prop that you provide.
Yeah.
That's a much different way to sell than somebody who just says, so what do you guys do? Which is what it was like for the first 15 years of my career, right? And I think that provides a unique challenge and probably elevates the role of good marketers to be able to not only equip the team, but also put them in a position where when somebody does come to them, you've helped create some of those biases for them. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about how that has shifted, where the level of education of the buyer right now is so high that when they come to you, you're dealing with a much different sort of beast than you were dealing with 10, 15 years ago. How do you still create success as a marketer when people have their own opinions before they ever talk to you about what you're selling to them?
Yeah, 100%. And like, especially if the sales are more complex, they think they are, they're ready to roll, or they're giving you a lot of objections at that point. This is where, and Corey can probably echo this like 1,000%. This is where you kind of say to yourself, it's not sales and marketing or sales versus marketing. It's really go to market. And what I mean by that is marketing could, literally bring you in, and bring that lead in. But as marketers, we cannot stop that process. We cannot walk away after I hand Corey the lead and say, good luck, buddy. And then all of a sudden he's like left to his own devices.
Yeah.
I think you need to build out enablement and tools that are going to help sales, basically, block and tackle along the way. So it's like, it used to be like marketing would say, to use the football analogy, right? I'm doing a running play, and I hand the football to the running back, and it's the running back's job to get to the end zone.
Right.
And I'm just the quarterback sitting there, whatever. The reality is I'm also the offensive line. I'm also blocking and tackling. I'm covering. I'm doing all the things I can do to make sure that running back gets to the end zone. And it's not the most clean analogy, but it works. And so we're helping build objection handling. We're helping build ROI calculators. We're helping to look at every phase in the journey, whether you're using, whatever sales model you're using, and we're just trying to figure out how can we help create a level of confidence and trust within that person, because they're coming in and they're saying, yeah, I know what you guys do.
I know what you do. I've even heard that.
Why you're better than the 800-pound gorilla. And so we're, obviously we're continuing to market ourselves at a product level with the sales team. And so if you're not lockstep with your sales team and like getting feedback and listening to calls and understanding what's gonna what pivots you have to make, as marketers, you're not doing your job down the funnel. And I always say, like, again, we're marketers, especially in the B2B world, leads, yeah, cool, whatever. Volume of leads, yeah, cool, whatever. It's really about like how much pipeline can you put in the hands of the sales team, and how can you help them get down that funnel and give them what they need to be successful. And we've done a lot of cool things. I mean, in at least detection, and in a couple other companies that I've worked for and with, that have kind of personalized a lot of things for these individual companies that are, savvy buyers. So
Yeah, and I think kind of when that handoff occurs and we're just hitting the circle button on our PlayStation to move from quarterback to offensive line to push it to receiver to make the additional block. It's probably good timing on this for the upcoming Super Bowl stuff. But anyways, I digress. When it would come over to the sales team, right, you're doing a great job of that branding, that messaging, creating top of funnel leads, right? But this is where the sales team also has to give you quality feedback, right? After we talk to that individual or share that information, we have to ask the right questions to say, is this even a qualified lead? Are they in a buying position right now? Or are they just truly, window shopping, kicking some tires right now, but right now is not the time. And that's, probably something for a whole nother segment, but at the same time, like understanding where your prospect is in that journey. So if we can understand that on the front end for Tim's group, share that back, what was resonating in that message, how do we make sure, hey, this is going to be a long buying cycle for this customer? How do we continually put information in front of them that stays valuable to them? It's hitting the key things they're looking for. You're staying top of mind. It's just nurturing that process, right? So that's why it was never flip it over the fence and here you go, Corey, and then we just run with it, and then I never say anything back to him, right? It was always continual dialogue and what's working, and let's rinse and repeat it, right?
yeah, and I'd even take it one step further is, if there is pipeline drop off, what does that look like, and how do you, as marketers, keep them in the mix, so to speak? So how do you continue to nurture them, right? So a lot of times, as marketers, we'll come at the top of the funnel and we'll, give away some free content, whatever it is, and we may nurture them for, 60, 90 days until they decide to raise their hand and say, I'm interested and I want to talk to the sales, and then goes through the whole process, and then, maybe it drops off and they just either ghost you ghost your sales team, or they say not now but later, I'm kind of not in the buying cycle. And then generally 9 times out of 10 what happens is it just dies on the vine. Like sales just closes the op and just says, oh well, all right. But the reality is like sales should be, marking that, flagging that, and then marketing should be going in and doing a whole new nurturing program to say, all right, we're going to come back in 6 months, or we're going to just keep sending them just information, good information, nothing pitchy. We're not going to try and pitch them, but like if there's a new webinar out there that we're going to do, or we just wrote an article that's relevant to them, we're just going to keep sending it to them, because really at the end of the day, if it's relevant content, if it's relevant information, it's unlikely someone's going to be offended by it. I think people aren't, people don't want to see ads, right? Nobody in this world wakes up and says, I can't wait to see an ad today. So as marketers, you don't go in and wake up and say, I can't wait to make an ad today. It's just not how it works. But I think, these days you can, at least get your prospects that have dropped off engaged with by sending them real, like, credible content, and just never stop marketing to them.
The one day of the year that people get excited to see ads or commercials is Super Bowl Sunday, of course, which is coming up. So obviously the timing of this podcast is perfect. And I don't even know what it costs now for a 30-second or 1 minute ad for the Super Bowl, but it's insane, right?
5 million. I think it's like 5 million and change. I think that's what it
For
is.
a minute or 30 seconds?
I think it's 30 seconds is 5 million. It's ridiculous. It's something like
I remember a few,
Don't quote me on that. I'm not, that's not my bag, but
Yeah.
but I seem to recall it being like ridiculous.
Yeah, Detection's ad last year, Tim, that you guys did for the Super Bowl, that was awesome. That was so
that went over
good.
well. Yeah, the PE firm loved that one, I'm sure.
It did, yeah. Sorry, Edward.
That's funny.
Yeah, so I love this, and I think that one of the things you just said that stood out to me is you just broke a perception that I think is important for young marketers and people that want to get into marketing, should realize and accept as truth, which is your job does not stop when you get the person to raise their hand and say, I'm ready to have a conversation. It's actually when your job starts, right? Because then you are responsible for that nurturing and to make sure that the engagement from the salesperson to the prospect is not just the salesperson trying to make a withdrawal and constantly asking for things from them. There needs to be continuous deposits and information and value added pieces of data, whether it's a case study or whether it's something that resonates with them or a press release or a podcast or whatever that keeps them engaged throughout the process. And that's the salesperson's job, in my opinion. But you're saying it's also the marketing team's job, right? Your job does not stop when you get the lead for the sales team. That's really the beginning of that nurture process. And then depending on which direction they go, it's almost like you've mapped this out to say, all right, well, if they're still trending in the right direction, we still need to give them more information to keep their confidence high so that when they do ultimately buy, their satisfaction is validated and real versus, okay, well, now's not the time. They go into this more nurture bucket. They still need to receive bits of information. It might be different information that they receive. But I think of all the things that you've said, that really hit home for me because I viewed that as the salesperson's job. And I think that is part of what makes you great is that you also see that as the marketer's job or the go-to-market team's job more broadly. And maybe I need to break down the concept of these silos that exist. But I don't know, growing up in sales, Corey, I feel like it was separate. Like sales would get mad at marketing and marketing would say, well, we're doing our job. The sales team isn't converting. It's this finger pointing. Well, why do they get all this budget to do all this stuff? Like we're the ones that have to do all the work and these leads are shit. And well, the sales team isn't converting this. And that needs to be the way of the past, right? Teams need to work in lockstep, hand in hand as a go-to-market team.
100%.
Well, and it's not, expand on this for us, Tim, because I'm leading you a bit. We got to break up the fragmentation, as you were saying, Jeremy, right? Our team versus their team versus the other team. Yeah. And that brings all kind of culture issues in there too as well. But this shows obviously sales and marketing importance, all the examples and conversation we've laid up, up to this point. But to the examples you were saying, Jeremy and Tim, like, how do you know what to put out there? You have to collaborate with people in the company. So far, we've focused on the collaboration between marketing and sales, but is that where it ends, right? Like, you got a product team and a development team on the other side of the table constantly investing and building into their tech, right, to solve problems and create more desired outcomes for somebody. So you got to be able to stay in touch with product just as much as sales to know what's going on to keep all those fresh, new messaging items for the prospects, right? I don't know. So talk a little bit about that, right? I know it kind of comes back to the intersection why I think it's important for a lot of companies to not devalue solid marketing folks because there's such a connection of their role beyond just their siloed department, Jeremy, like you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Like it goes through everything, and it's talking to even customer success, and finding out what your customers are hearing in the market, talking to product. Everybody has a stake in what the challenges are, and it's funny because I have on my website, and I've given it to a couple clients, is like the 50 questions you need to ask to understand, what your buyer is thinking about or talking about. And it does go through, top of funnel, top of content, whatever it is, but it also goes through product. It also goes through support. It goes through customer service, and you just start going. And everybody has like different perspectives on what a customer is thinking about or what they're doing, and how they are interpreting that buying journey. And and if you're not getting visibility into any of that, then you may step over yourself, and you may say, okay, well, we don't have this product and we don't have this thing, so we can't market to it. Whereas if you don't know what's going down the product roadmap, and it may be there, it may be something of value. And so I think there's a lot to be said about building a cadence, if you will, of getting together with not just sales and marketing, but getting together with the different stakeholders who are holding did the different pieces of the whole dynamic, and just thinking about how do we leverage the knowledge within our company to make sure that we're putting the best possible version of our story, or the story that needs to be told, to come back to it, um, to that buyer at every stage in the game. So, yeah.
I mean, you can't have silos. I know we've really kind of focused on like small, medium sized type companies, right? Where they can naturally and easily create silos, but you take a step back, those silos should not exist in any organization of that size, but it's just kind of how the cookie crumbles sometimes. But I mean, you and I would really try to break that down and say, hey, let's have a meeting, right? Let's not add one just to add one, but we want to bring in product, we want to bring in marketing, we want to bring in sales. So everyone's kind of staying in touch in real time, right? And what are we hearing on the streets from a sales side? What's marketing working on, so they can feed off of that? Product can share what they need to. Customer service can say, hey, I've met with existing accounts. This seems to be the common feedback I'm hearing, right? So we're able to all hear about it, and really kind of work alongside each other. I think it was a really good way of breaking that down, Tim, and being on the same page.
Yeah, and they loved it, by the way. I mean, it wasn't like there was any sort of, all of a sudden there was these aha moments where they're like, wait, you guys are doing what? And then all of a sudden they'll say, well, I was hoping that we could actually promote that webinar inside the product. I'm like, you can? Yeah, we could totally do that.
Yeah.
And, oh, I'd love to do a product spotlight with you. So like I would get on, and, just by having those meetings, ideas would come up, and all of a sudden we'd start doing like customer spotlights or product spotlights, or we'd start doing these little snippet videos,
Yeah.
this digestible content, which is really like reels and like quick hits, and something that's under 25 minutes, 30 minutes, that people don't have time to sit there for an hour or so, just listen to people drone on and have death by PowerPoint. These are just like little quick hits that you could put on a LinkedIn feed, and they're like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah.
I think that's the way of the world, right? And so I think if you can connect with your different stakeholders, you're going to find that they have great ideas, and they'll have all these great insights into how you can connect, and build out that go-to-market engine, so it's more robust.
Yeah, I think content is leverage, and I think every company, anybody who's listening to this, whether it's your own personal brand or the company that you work for, you should always be thinking about how you can leverage content to further your brand, right? Not just amplifying things from the company that you work for, but actually authentically leaning into your own personal brand, and then building out your company brand in a sort of a fun and creative way. I think that at least resonates with me. I think it resonates with a lot of people. Also, understanding people's attention spans are shorter. I've been saying this for a few years, but emails, like ever since the advent of Twitter, which was originally 140 characters, and I guess it's longer now, but that's all people can really digest in an email, right? So how do you then take all this information you want to share with somebody in a short story into one paragraph? It's very hard to do that. AI doesn't even do that very well, right? I'm like, make it shorter, make it shorter. Same things I'd say to my sales guys is, it's a good email, cut it in half. Well, I don't know. You have to do it. I'm not going to tell you exactly how, but you got to do it, right? If you want to get them to respond, you need to make it shorter. I want to flip over a little bit to the big swing side of things. What are some of the big swings that you've taken in your career? And maybe it's right now with your own marketing firm that you're taking to market. But give me some of the big swings that you've taken in your life and your career, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea of big swings, because it just implies so many different things, right? And the reality is like I was thinking about this when before I came on. I'm like, well, it's funny because some of the best sluggers in baseball, right? They got what, 300, 400 average. That means they're connecting maybe 30-40% of the time. And so I think it says a lot to the idea of not every swing is going to connect, but if you keep at it, and even if you're successful half the time, you're better than some of the pros out there. And I think that's kind of a cool way to think about it. But like, I think it's any big swing you have is taking a risk to get a result. So I've left companies where I was comfortable, just to take a risk on some, ground up marketing build. Sometimes I was motivated by different things, but other times I was motivated by just the thrill. But yeah, I would say like reinvigorating my business, Big Breakthrough Marketing, was one of those. It was a shift. The timing was right for me. And I thought, why not give it a try? Why not carve out my little corner of the world and, find these growing B2B tech companies and, help them break through that marketing barrier. So yeah, that definitely was one of those big swings. And I think, as if I would give any advice to anybody who's kind of saying, well, what's the big swings I could take, as a company learning to just, like navigate my way through growth or whatever you want to call it, is to take what I would call controlled mistakes. And so like just go out there and try things, right? So don't get comfortable with status quo. Don't get comfortable with one thing or the other. Everybody says, oh, well, this is working, so let's just keep doing it. Or we've always done this, let's just keep doing it. Just don't be afraid to make these little controlled mistakes. So like, and what I mean by that is you're making, you're going out there and you're trying something different with the expectation that it's not going to interrupt or destroy your brand or anything like that. It's one of those things like it may work, it may not work, but it may make you stand out. Like, I mean, heck, at Detection, I decided to make a VR game because we couldn't bring a compression skid to a conference.
Right.
It wasn't like something you could exactly just like put in your suitcase. So we were like, heck, let's
Cool.
like get a VR program together, and it had like a CAD drawing of a skid, and we would go through this whole thing, and did it change the dynamic of everything? No, but I can tell you what, it made us stand out. I mean, people were like jazzed about it. If they were into it. I mean, again, like some people get on VR and they start getting vertigo, so you have to be careful with that one.
Yeah.
But I think there's things that you could do, especially when you're a little company or you're growing and you're that small mighty company that are trying to break through. You can take some big swings with how you do things differently that maybe other people aren't doing. And like I said, if it doesn't work, that's okay, as long as you understand that like I'm going to try it and I'm still going to just pivot quickly, because there's controlled mistakes where you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to do this, and did it work? No, we pivot. Then there's we're just going to keep banging on this, and it's going to work eventually. And then 6 months down the line, all of a sudden you burned your budget, and you're like, why did this happen? So you have to be very very you have to be very controlled about how you approach new marketing ideas and taking those big swings. So there's a lot of things. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we could go on all day, but we've got to pivot to the picks segment of the podcast. So, with Super Bowl 60 coming up this weekend, Corey, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, well, before I give mine, I thought Tim was going to say one of his biggest swings was being a New York Jets fan.
Yeah.
Hold on, come on to that. Hey, but you know what?
Cheers.
I said with the Cowboys over here. So, yeah, let me give you a few, because it is the Super Bowl. And what makes the Super Bowl fun is a lot of the prop bets and a lot of the things that are out there. So we don't want to just really focus on a side or a total. Honestly, I don't really love a side or a total that much. It's kind of interesting. I might be leaning the Pats with the points, Jeremy, but I still think the Seahawks kind of take it, but it'll be interesting. I like George Alani for the Seahawks over 1.5 receptions.
Okay.
Don't sleep on this guy. And it's one of those people kind of play like get a reception first half, second half, get another reception. So I think there's some value there. I think Drake May under 46.5 passing yards in the first quarter. Teams usually like to play pretty conservatively, not show their hands. Think about it too. If the Seahawks get the ball first, right, and these teams can run the clock a little bit on a drive, one team might only get one possession, right? But they're going to want to make sure it's there. And I think Drake might get the points in total, but that first quarter is when I'm watching on. And AJ Barner for the Seahawks, over 2.5 receptions. So there's a little research going on here, obviously, beforehand, but wanted to give a couple with it. But look, I think everyone's on the Seahawks. Everyone's on it, but the line is not moving. So it's kind of interesting to me. I think people are going to start putting it on the Patriots. I don't think they'll let it get to 5.5 or 6. No. 4.5, I think, is pretty good value in the NFL. Pats haven't put it together as well in offense in the playoffs in a way, but they always find a way, right? And 4.5 is still just a lot of points. So that is my breakdown for the Super Bowl. Those are my picks for everybody out there.
Tim, what about you? You want to just do a game pick?
Yeah, no, I am not, as I did not do any of the sabermetrics here like he's been doing, so I'm kind of... so here's the deal. Like he said, I'm a Jet fan. I'm a long-suffering Jet fan.
Oh, man, I'm sorry.
So my mantra at this point is anyone but the Pats. So
fair enough.
I literally say, that was my mantra. And, I switched to Bills once the Jets were basically out, because I do have a soft spot in my heart for the Bills. But once they left, the other side of the coin for me is Seahawks. You got Sam Darnold there, and he used to be a Jet, and it's so funny. I was just joking with Corey before we got on. It was like, I feel like everybody who has played at the Jets has moved on to better things. So I like to take credit as the Jets being the proving ground and saying, well, I guess if the Jets, they leave the Jets and all of a sudden they get really good. So I'm all for Seahawks, and I can't see another Patriots dynasty. I just can't. Oh God, I can't.
I love it. But so yeah, I'm calling the game, so I can't make a pick. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, Kirk Street over here.
I mean, I got the Pats, right? I got the Pats 2017 in this one, taking it down. I have Stephon Diggs. The Seahawks play a lot of zone. Diggs tends to play very well against zone. I have his over on 4.5 receptions, and I have his over on 40 yards for this game. I've played both of those. I do think both quarterbacks will have at least one turnover, so I think that's something to consider as far as a bet. But I do think this will be a bit of a grinded-out game, bit of a slugfest, a little bit lower scoring. And I don't know. I think it'll be tight. But I don't know. This Pats team, something special about him, and I think we're going to take it home. So that's my pick. I'm totally not biased or anything like that either, so at least we got that.
No, there's no emotional. It's all with the mind, not the heart. So
no heart whatsoever.
I will throw this out there. I'm not about making plays that are like the crazy, like what will the score be? Like guessing the perfect score in these crazy outline lines, like you either take one side, yes, no, or over under. But I'll say this: if you think the Seahawks are going to win, I think they've had blue Gatorade the last few Super Bowls. So if you want to go to that Gatorade prop situation, go see what the line is on blue Powerade or blue Gatorade, just out there. And don't play heads or tails through the through the bet. It's a 50-50 thing, and you got to like lay more money. Just pick a friend and say, you take heads, I take tails. Whoever wins takes it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the over under on the length of the national anthem is one too. It almost always goes long, right? Because that person really wants to milk that moment, whoever it is, right?
So I listened to this the other day. I thought it was true. They said that stuff they rehearse it, right? So if you see the line for it come out at like 2 minutes and then it shifts to 2:02, then people know to rehearse like, okay, it's going over. So they adjust the line by that 1 second. And so they would always say, if you see that move, buy it back down to 2 minutes, right? Because it's going to hit majority of the time because it's all timed. It's all rehearsed for that. I was with you for so long and I kept playing the over with people. And I'm like, okay, they don't want their 10 minutes of fame, obviously, to occur. They're trying to keep it under the time and get the game moving. So
yeah, no doubt.
I thought that was just interesting to share with it, man. It was funny.
I dig it. Enjoy the game. Tim, where can people find you? What's your website? You on LinkedIn? Where's the best place people want to reach out, talk about how maybe they can get their own big breakthrough?
No, I'm on LinkedIn all the time. The website is bigbreakthrough.com, big-breakthrough. pitchy.com. And, you can find me there. Take a look at what I've been doing. I'm usually posting about stuff once a week or so, give or take, everyone, and trying to like put my content out there and helping people to just, understand a little bit more about what it takes to kind of break through that barrier to get into growth. So check me out, man. I'll be around.
That's awesome.
Love it. Tim Lozier with the Z, thank you for coming on. Super meaningful to me. You're a good dude. I like all of the things that you did for detection. A lot of it is still being reused content-wise, and what both of you put in place there has been awesome. So appreciate you coming on the pod today. Corey, you're doing great, man. You're finding your rhythm, man. You're crushing it. You don't even need me.
No, man, it's not like that. But Tim, it was an honor, man. Glad to have you as the first guest on the podcast for this, man. So I'm glad we got to do it with the trio of us. Thanks for coming on, brother.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Had fun. A lot of good times.
Awesome.